Welcome back to Sacred Source Authority. I almost said superhero cuts, but welcome back to Sacred Source Authority. We got a lot to get into tonight, so welcome back. Glad that you're here. I know that Peacemaker is on, so I was, wondering if I should maybe move the time, but I'm trying to stay consistent with the time, so I appreciate you guys for coming. All right, so we obviously have a crazy past couple of days with news going on, and we have a lot to get into with both Marvel and the DCU. We're going to get into all the Marvel stuff first, but I promise the DCU stuff is going to be worth it to stay around. But getting into Marvel, Avengers. So, listen, I call the Avengers cycles. Ever since Infinity War and Endgame, that was like a cycle. Those two movies were really a unit. And it's been pretty clear that Marvel is doing the same kind of thing with Doomsday and Secret Wars, and that's supposed to be a two-movie back-to-back thing. And it's really, I was thinking a lot about it after reading all the leaks and all the stuff that has, kind of happened over the past week. It really is Marvel's most ambitious move yet. This is the biggest Marvel story basically ever. The Avengers Saga, time runs out, Secret Wars, and they're bringing in Doctor Doom. They brought Robert Downey Jr. back. It is by far the most ambitious thing Marvel has ever done when it comes to live action. And they're doing it following the Multiversal Saga. And the Multiversal Saga has been pretty lackluster for the most part. I saw a couple good posts on X over the past couple of days, and some people were kind of saying it wasn't as bad as we thought. And yeah, there were some great movies in the Multiversal Saga, but there were way more disappointments than there were great movies. And if those went differently, I think fans would be feeling very differently right now. Anyway, there's been a lot of drama on set with Marvel and the Doomsday cast. I'm sure you guys have seen. So Alan Cumming, who played Nightcrawler in X-Men, Alan Cumming was making comments about how he doesn't even know who he's filming with. And they're filming with people with like different faces, or I guess, and they're using fake names. That is a major red flag to me, because when it comes to actors and working together on set, chemistry and cohesiveness is so important. That's one of the reasons that Superman worked. It's one of the reasons Fantastic Four worked. It's one of the reasons the OG Avengers worked, because Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and Chris Hemsworth were so great together. And then they added more cast members that also worked well with them, like Natasha Romanoff and Scarlett Johansson. And that's what Thunderbolts was so great for. So now they're bringing in all these actors who, for the most part, they've worked with like their teams before. The Avengers have worked together. The new Avengers have worked together. The X-Men have worked together. But they're being paired up with a lot of people that have never worked together. And there's a lot of big name actors. One of the things that people overlook in sports is that, like, when Miami Heat won so many championships back to back, a lot of people were saying Eric Spoelstra is a great coach because he worked with so much big talent together, and that's not always an easy thing to do, because you get hotheads, you get guys that are paid a lot, they're super talented. And I don't think it's very different when it comes to the set on Avengers Doomsday. And now we're finding out there was a fight between two major actors. And I got to tell you, I think it was between, and I know everyone is saying this, but I agree. I think it was probably between Robert Downey Jr. and Pedro Pascal. I think both of them are huge names. They're the two biggest names there. I don't think they've ever worked together before. So, yeah, I think it's between them. I could totally be wrong. There's a lot of actors there. I don't think we're going to find out who it is. And if we do find out, I don't think it's going to be for a very long time, unless some scooper finds out and brings it to us sooner, which is, I guess, a possibility. I think that's the only way we'll find out sooner. Other than that, I could see it like 10 years down the line on some talk show, some actor's going to be like, yeah, this is what happened and whatever, But I think it's a problem, and it's a problem considering how ambitious these movies are for Marvel, and I hope they didn't bite off more than they could chew. But anyway, the other component to a lot of this is that we're now finding out about Doctor Doom's role in Avengers Doomsday, where he is targeting those responsible for the incursions. That includes Monica, Doctor Strange, Peter, the Venom symbiote, Wanda, Steve Rogers, and Gamora. So, this is why I always try to connect it to the comics, because the thing about the comics here that you have to understand is that in Secret Wars, this is what happened, okay? You see this picture here? This is from the first or second issue of Secret Wars. I forget which one I pulled it from. But Doctor Doom is the emperor over the whole planet, which, again, like I've told you before, this is what the planet that he built from the incursions. But you have Doctor Doom basically kissing the ring. And Doctor Doom's even telling him to, bow down, and he does it. So I'm not surprised to see Doctor Doom pairing up with Doctor Strange pairing up with Doctor Doom. Now, there is some discrepancy here. Some people are saying that he is pairing up with Doctor Doom as the villain. What Josh Den of Nerds was saying is he's actually pairing up with Doctor Doom as the hero. And they're starting to say that Doctor Doom is the hero of Avengers Doomsday, which I love to hear. I don't really think Doctor Doom is a hero, but sometimes he does try to save the world, but he's like always willing to do something that's so savage with the ends justify the means. And that's not what the heroes do. The heroes fight over, the ends justifying the means, which is something that happened between Captain America and Iron Man. By the way, in this panel that you see right here, that is Superior Iron Man. Superior Iron Man is a version of Iron Man who's much more egotistical, who basically let his flaws run wild. And that's why you could even see he doesn't even have a mask on. And sometimes as Superior Iron Man, he does wear the mask, but he shows his face a lot because he's a more egotistical version of the character. That's the point. Anyway, they were fighting because Tony Stark built the Illuminati behind Steve Rogers' back because they wanted to save themselves from colliding with another Earth from the incursion. And Steve Rogers, he did it behind his back because he knew Steve was never going to be okay with sacrificing that planet. So, stark difference between Doctor Doom and the heroes. But it's going to be interesting seeing Doctor Doom as the hero or the lead, as someone who's trying to save the day with the incursions, considering he's also going to be the one that's probably going to do what he did in the comics in Secret Wars, where he's going to put the Earth together and just take over the whole thing and make everyone kiss the ring like I just showed you. So I think that's really cool. I think Robert Downey Jr. leading is a good thing. Like, they're taking a lot of big swings here, but they are doing a lot of things to try to play it safe. They know if they could bet on a big star for an Avengers movie, they know it's Robert Downey Jr. And I believe that Robert Downey Jr. is going to win the doubters over, the people who complained that it's just a cash grab, it's the low-hanging fruit. And you know me, I'll always criticize them for taking the low-hanging fruit, but I really do believe they had to cast RDJ as Doctor Doom. I think that was the move. As much as at the time, I always said I wanted to see Mads Mikkelsen, or, I think I probably had some other names I mentioned. And I'm not a big fan casting guy, but I do think RDJ is the safe play, even though they're taking a lot of big swings on this. So having said that, it's going to be interesting seeing Doom targeting those responsible for the incursions because, yeah, the ends justify the means. But one thing I'm confused about on this is that Doctor Doom is a strategist. He is someone who is, he's not going to do something to just waste time. So, like, what I don't understand is why he's going to go after those who caused incursions when, first of all, they don't really know what they were doing. And yeah, Doom doesn't have patience for incompetence. But at the same time, like, they caused the incursions. The incursions are already happening. So what's the point of going after these heroes when, what's done is done? They're not doing anything additional at this point, at least from what we know, to, continue causing incursions. But I do like the Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom alliance. I think that's a really cool idea to just rip the Band-Aid off for what fans could expect with Secret Wars, because the characters that we know and love are going to be different in Secret Wars, and they are going to make different decisions than the ones we have come to expect of them. Anyway, the other interesting piece here is that John Bernthal has been confirmed to be in Secret Wars. So I don't think that John Bernthal is going to just be the Punisher in this type of costume. I think it's going to be, War Machine Punisher, because how else could the Punisher really, be a threat in Doomsday? Or, he's just going to be his savage self, and, maybe, but all the other heroes who have like crazy supernatural powers that he's going to be dealing with and villains in Secret Wars, I do think that the War Machine Punisher is coming. And I think it's the move. Like, everyone loves Punisher. Everyone, the MCU fans obviously love spectacle. Just let it happen at this point. Fans have been talking about it for a while too. So I think that would be cool. I love that John Bernthal Punisher is finally getting his time to shine, because this character, like, when Daredevil first came out, and don't get me wrong, I love Daredevil. He's one of my all-time favorite characters. He might even be in my top 5 on the right day. But when Daredevil season 2 happened and that Punisher like prison fight happened, I just wanted Punisher. I was just like, this Daredevil season's like okay, but I want Punisher. And then Punisher season 1 dropped, and I still think that Punisher season 1 from the Netflix Marvel stuff is the best Netflix Marvel show that they made, period. What else we got? All right, so Marvel Studios has also rebuilt the Steve and Peggy house for Avengers Doomsday. And that is one of the things that people are talking about now too, that the house, Steve Rogers going back in time and putting the stones back isn't what caused the incursions, but him staying with Peggy had a hand in that. So, when they talk about things like that, it does sound like a lot of Avengers Doomsday is going to be tied into the concept of Loki and of characters doing things that, fractured new timelines from the sacred timeline. It seems like they're going to be tying the Doomsday story into that, which I love, because I think that they have to make the Multiversal Saga have significance for there to be a payoff in Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, aka the upcoming Avengers cycle. So I think that's a major win. Like, you got to tie it together somehow. And yeah, so the timeline piece in Loki, everyone already loved that. So I think that's a really good idea to do that. But Doctor Doom, he's just going to be savage, and the ends justifying the means is going to be really cool to see. I don't think Doctor Doom is going to be the only lead, though. I think it's very possible we're going to see Iron Man. Like I've already said, if they are reaching back all the way to the 2000s and they're bringing back the Fox X-Men, box office is down. They already are paying Robert Downey Jr. reportedly $100 million for 2 movies, and he's already on set. I think he's playing Iron Man, and they're already bringing back Captain America. So I think we're going to see Iron Man, Doctor Doom, and hopefully it's going to be Pedro versus Doctor Doom in Secret Wars, as it should. But they're going to have to get it together on set, because whatever's going on there is a problem. And it's not, fans were already starting to say that they think Avengers Doomsday is a hot mess, and they think this movie is going to be absolutely garbage based on the way it's being made. And now you have that coming out, that actors are fighting on set, and that they're not even shooting together other than fighting. Like, they're just keeping character names secret from who they're shooting with based on what Alan Cumming, the Nightcrawler actor, said. So I think that's a problem, and it came at the worst time, because it came at a time when fans were starting to really suspect that this is the kind of situation that was going down, on the Avengers Doomsday set. So, okay. Now, there are a couple things I want to get into with Spider-Man. We got some really big Spider-Man news, and this is a big deal because, Kevin Feige had indicated that they're finally making a Spider-Man movie for the MCU that is going to be a classical Spider-Man movie and going to do Spider-Man justice rather than just compromising to push the rest of the MCU story forward. And the other thing that they've been saying is that now that's come out from the new Alex Perez drop is that Spider-Man Brand New Day is like a comic book brought to life. And I'm kind of torn about that statement in itself because you all know I love comic books. I'm a comic book fanatic. So I love that they are making movies that are comic books brought to life. That's a huge W for me. But it seems like they're starting to say that about absolutely every movie. They said it first kind of came about from the Spider-Verse movies. Then Superman was a big one, they said. Then Fantastic Four. And I like that they're trying to, make these movies feel closer to the comic books. I just don't want it to be the best movie since Endgame thing where they say it about every movie, and it's just not even true. So that's my concern. But, it does seem like there is a real push to make the live action movies closer to the comic book source material, the sacred source material. So, listen, I think that's a good thing. I just hope it doesn't get played out and in an inauthentic way to talk about your movie to hype up fans, because we all know that these, movie studios, they have a lot of gimmicks up their sleeve and they're not shy about using them. The other piece, though, is that they are also saying now there's a leak that Yelena is going to be recruiting Peter Parker into the new Avengers. And I'm also torn about this, too, because I do think that Spider-Man is going to have to work with some other heroes in some form in Avengers Doomsday and or Secret Wars. And, they have indicated that Spider-Man is now going to be in, and the leaks are saying that Spider-Man is going to be in Doomsday now, and it's going to be a small role, but an impactful role, meaning he's not going to have a lot of screen time, but his screen time is going to be used for him to have a big impact on the movie, which is fine. He was barely in Endgame, for example, and that was fine. So I think that's fine. But I do want to – I don't know how much I like that they're going to be working with the new Avengers. I think they have to do it, but we barely got to see Spider-Man on his own suffering the consequences of No Way Home. And I think the angle of nobody knowing who Peter Parker is makes for a really interesting concept to let play out. And we're basically going to get one movie, maybe not even one movie, that, it could be that Yelena is starting to recruit him in Brand New Day. We don't really know which movie she's going to be recruiting him in. I hope that is Avengers Doomsday and not Brand New Day, because I would love to see at least the consequences of No Way Home play out for a full Spider-Man movie rather than just, the first 20 minutes or whatever. But how could they involve him in Avengers Doomsday or Secret Wars if he's just kind of a rogue hero on his own? So I think, it's a bit of a give and take there. It goes both ways. But yeah. Okay. They also cast this actor, what was his name? Trammell Tillman. So Trammell Tillman was cast in the Spider-Man Brand New Day. And Spider-Man Brand New Day, a lot of people are like, oh, he's going to be playing Kang. He's going to be playing Norman Osborn. First of all, we don't know if he's going to be playing, he could be playing a teacher for all we know. And I saw someone say that, but I always think that's funny because we always have these actors who get cast, and everyone's always like, oh, it's got to be a big role. You know, a lot of the times we all make a bigger deal about something because we're so obsessed with talking about it, and then the movie comes out and it's not a big deal at all. Like before Spider-Man No Way Home, everyone was making a big deal about the Department of Damage Control, and then the Department of Damage Control was in it for like 2 minutes and barely had a big impact on the movie. But having said that, this is a big up-and-coming actor right now. I love him in Severance. He is great. He's like the manager of the severed floor. So he actually has a big role in that show. You know, Tom Cruise even really liked the show Severance, and that's why Trammell ended up in Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, which I also loved, and I thought he was great in. He had a small role, but still is a good actor. So I think he's good. I hope he is a bigger character. Like, I hope he is Norman Osborn or someone like that we all really want to see. So, you know, the other thing I wanted to talk about is that now they're talking about the symbiote, and there was this photo from the set of Spider-Man Brand New Day, and it says symbiosis. And it has to mean the symbiote is in the movie in some way, shape, or form. You know, we know that they're trying to keep the main villain under wraps or a secret, but I don't think it's going to be Venom. And now there are leakers that are saying that Mac Gargan, Scorpion, is going to be a Venom version of Scorpion, which I got to tell you, I hate Scorpion. Scorpion is such a lame villain. You know, he's got a cool looking suit, but that's really about it. There are so many better Spider-Man rogues to choose from. Even if he has the symbiote, like, that just makes him more powerful, but it doesn't make him more interesting of a character. So I hope that there is someone pulling the strings like Kingpin, and now they're talking about Kingpin potentially being in the movie, which I mentioned before. I think that was a possibility because, again, if there's someone pulling the strings for Spider-Man, Punisher, and Hulk to be fighting each other, that has to be someone who is very powerful and a strategist and a manipulator, someone like Kingpin or someone like Norman Osborn or someone like Tombstone. And they're also saying Tombstone is supposed to be in the movie. The other thing I want to say, though, is we can't get so caught up on all the villains for Spider-Man Brand New Day. And this is something that I always wanted to say because, again, similar to the Department of Damage Control thing, there are a lot of times where there's leaks and there's like, oh, this character is going to be in the movie. And the character's in the movie for 2 seconds. And supposedly what they're doing with Spider-Man Brand New Day is that in the opening of the movie, there's going to be like a quick montage of what it was like for Spider-Man post No Way Home. And it was going to be similar to the Fantastic Four First Steps montage, where we got to see the Fantastic Four use their powers and kind of skip over the origin. But I think that that's kind of going to be the case with Spider-Man 2. I think there's going to be some kind of montage where we're going to see what life was like for Spider-Man post No Way Home, where he's fighting a bunch of villains, and there's going to be a bunch of villain names that we've been talking about all year up until Spider-Man Brand New Day releases, and those villains are going to have like 2 seconds of screen time each. And I don't know if that's going to be the case with Scorpion, because Scorpion's starting to seem like he might be a big deal. But let me tell you something. Scorpion is not a big bad. Scorpion is he is a bottom tier character. He's a bottom tier villain. He sucks. When I see him come up in a comic, I get annoyed. I cannot stand like villains like him. He just sucks. So I really hope that he is one of the ones in the montage and not one of the ones that are more important, because Spider-Man is one of the greatest characters of all time. And because of that, he also has some of the best villains of all time. And like, what are we doing here when we're choosing villains like Scorpion? So that to me is just stupid. But, you know, Peter into the new Avengers, I think is really interesting. And I think that that is important for the Avengers cycle. But again, I just want to see him be on his own for Spider-Man Brand New Day for a bit. Okay. So now we're going to get into James Gunn. So James Gunn, was saying how the DCU is not really like the MCU, and it's more like Star Wars or Game of Thrones, where there's really this whole universe, and they are looking at the universe and telling individual stories and then eventually crossover stories within that universe that they kind of already have a map for. And one of the things about the DCU is that it can't just be the DC version of the MCU. For the DCU to thrive, it has to feel fresh and new. And in order for that to happen, James Gunn has to innovate. And it feels like he is in a lot of ways. I think it was a bold move for them to release Superman early. Them releasing Superman early was genius, especially because it made the money that they were hoping to make. And now they have Peacemaker Season 2, which is dropping right now. And they're tying that into that story. And James Gunn did clarify that it's not really a multiversal story, but it's more interdimensional. So I'm curious to see what he means by that. But the other thing here is that I thought I had this picture. Hold on. Okay, well, anyway, the picture's not working, but one of the things that they did, which was genius in Superman, was the fact that there were so many like talking scenes where there were other things happening. My best example for that was when Superman was having that serious conversation in Lois's apartment, and they were talking about how they view just people differently. Lois was like, "You're kind of a dork. You're not really punk rock." And Superman was like, "Well, maybe the way I see people, it is the real punk rock." They, in these big IP superhero movies, they try to make sure there's enough spectacle to balance the drama, to hold fans' attention. It is what it is. But one of the ways that James Gunn did that was so genius was that behind the window, there was the Justice Gang fighting the Dimensional Imp. So these drama scenes where they got to drive, this character depth and character growth and, putting Lois and Superman's outlook just on the world against each other to kind of define both of them and define Superman's, morality. That's like a big feat of his character. They were able to do that by keeping it spectacle, by just putting spectacle in the background. And they had a lot of things that they did in that movie to do that. And when you're watching that movie, the 2 hours really flies by, and you don't really feel those drama scenes where dialogue is so rich and so important. You don't feel it bog that movie down, and it feels like the 2 hours are just nonstop spectacle. James Gunn really is a brilliant creative, and he's an innovator. And I think he did a phenomenal job with Superman. And he, in a lot of ways, did things that we've never really seen before in superhero filmmaking. And I think he's going to be a major trendsetter. It seems like he did a great job with Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, but it's clear that James Gunn saved a lot of his best ideas for another day. And it seems like we're finally getting that day right now. They're also talking about how the next sequel, which James Gunn said they're basically finished filming, is that it's not a direct sequel to Superman, meaning it. And he also had mentioned that they're going to have the characters that we saw in Superman, meaning the Justice Gang. So it's going to be some kind of crossover movie. And he did mention Superman Saga. So it's interesting that the Justice Gang is going to be a big part of it. But it's not a direct Superman sequel, but it is part of the Superman saga. And I think it's very difficult to guess what's going on. James Gunn's very responsive to fans online, but at the same time, he does keep a lot of things close to the chest. And I think that's a better thing than, listen, obviously I love the leaks and the scoops and I love talking about it, but I also like going into a movie not knowing much and just getting to enjoy it. And I think that's what James Gunn is trying to do with a lot of the things in the DCU, and he was talking about what it was like writing on, I Think You're Overthinking It podcast, which I listened to. And it was interesting because he was saying how, I just sit down and I grind and I write. And when I'm writing, I always think it's not going to be good. And then by the time I'm done, I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty good, and I don't know if that's why he keeps it close to the chest, but nonetheless, the effect of less scoops and less leaks coming out is definitely better than what Marvel is dealing with, where Kevin Feige is putting out fake information, fake scoops. Some even swear he's put out fake scripts to throw people off and kind of drive people down the wrong rabbit hole. We don't know much about what's going on, but we do know that they mentioned that Batman is coming along well. They mentioned that Wonder Woman is coming along well. They mentioned that Booster Gold is coming along well, and that there is a secret TV series being worked on right now that apparently is almost finished. And I don't even have a guess for what that could be. But I do think it could probably be a lesser known character, where that's one of the things James Gunn loves to do. And by the way, when you bring a lesser known character to live action and it works, you get so much more credit than you almost do than doing a Batman movie where everyone just already loves Batman. For example, when people walked out of Iron Man and didn't really know who Iron Man was, and next thing you know, Iron Man was like one of their favorite superheroes of all time, like Marvel had a major win there. And that's where James Gunn's career really started, with the Guardians of the Galaxy. And he's done that now a number of times with a number of different characters. So I like that he's doing that, but I need more. I still need more of the Trinity. I need Batman. I need Wonder Woman. Lanterns we know is coming, thank God. But, what is going on with Batman? And I know a lot of people think that they are just going to merge Pattinson, even though James Gunn said they're not going to do that a number of times. I don't think that's what's happening. I think that they are probably concerned with how they're going to release the Batman movies, because, and this is something I said for a long time on Superhero Cuts, is that I said they're never going to release two Batman movies in the same year. And then James Gunn came out and confirmed that. I mean, but that's just business 101. You have two products that are relatively similar. You got to give them both their moment in the market. And you can, if you put them out at the same time, they're just going to take from each other. Whereas if you put one out in 2027 and then another one out in 2028, both of them could be in the position to have the most optimal success. And when I say optimal, I'm meaning the best box office success, the best critical reception, the best fan reception, all those check boxes that they want to hit when they release a movie. But Superman, people are loving Superman again. I mean, this got me to want to read more Superman comics. And I already read a decent amount of Superman comics, and probably more than most people. But this movie, just rewatching it, has me more interested in Superman. And I think that, going back to the lesser known character thing, obviously that's not the case with Superman, because he's like the most iconic superhero of all time. However, he was very misunderstood superhero by a lot of people, and he wasn't really done correctly in live action. And I liked the Snyder movies when they came out at the time, and I still do appreciate them to some extent, but once I got into comics and I saw how different Superman was in the comics, that was kind of irritating for me with the Snyder role. Like, you have to treat the source material as sacred. And that's why I named the show this. I wanted to make sure people understood that this show is about the movies, but it's also backed by my comic knowledge. I want to at least capitalize on it, because I read so damn many of them. So I'm just a freak, like when I want to learn about a character, I want to learn everything. I'm just an obsessive person like that. So that's kind of, when I get into something, I'm just super passionate about it. And I think that, that's kind of probably how James Gunn is. And that's how he got to where he is, because he just loves comic books. And you need people that love comic books to be behind the DCU and doing this. So, I don't know, Kevco, welcome back, Kevco. Nice to see you here. Thanks for joining before you watch Peacemaker. Man of Steel made me a Superman reader. Then I understood why people had issues with the film. Exactly. And listen, it's a great movie. Like, I don't think anyone could argue Man of Steel isn't a good movie, but it's not an accurate depiction of Superman. And I don't have a problem with inaccurate depictions of characters sometimes. Like I was saying before, or the other day, is that the cool thing about variants in the multiverse is that you get to see different versions of characters, and that's what makes variants interesting. And that's where the MCU really, really dropped the ball. And people are interested in different versions of the characters in variants, because if they weren't, the Ultimate Universe from Marvel and the Absolute Universe from DC wouldn't both be the hottest things in comics right now. So there is a place for it. But when you're launching a universe and you're making a Superman movie, you got to go comic accurate. You have to do the classic definitive version of the character. It's one thing if you want to do a couple Superman movies and then at some point you want to do Red Sun or something, different. That's one thing. But if people don't have that definitive version and they only have an inaccurate version, that's when you're going to get complaints. So I think that's interesting. And by the way, I would love to see some form of live action or animated version of some of the Ultimate stuff going on with Marvel or the Absolute stuff going on with DC. I mean, it is just incredible. It's my favorite thing. They're my favorite books in comics right now, along with Imperial. And by the way, if you want a comic recommendation from me right now, this new Jonathan Hickman book, Imperial, is absolutely incredible. And for all the people who want to say that Dennis Camp is up there with Hickman, you read Imperial and then you come back and try to tell me that Dennis Camp's book that everyone's loving right now, Absolute Martian Manhunter, which I love too. It's a really cool comic, but it doesn't hold a candle to Imperial or Ultimate Spider-Man. Okay. But again, like, these interesting different versions of the characters in these Ultimate and Absolute books are really cool. And the fact that those are like the hottest selling comics proves that there is an interest in fans and a demand for different versions of the characters. But that demand is there because you know what they didn't stop doing? They didn't stop doing Amazing Spider-Man. They didn't stop doing mainline Batman comics. They're selling this as an alternative, not as the only version they're offering. So I think that that's a big, big clarification that people miss when they try to justify the Snyderverse. The other thing that's interesting about Superman is that something really special is happening with this movie right now, okay? Because if you look on Twitter, there is so much discourse around Superman's box office. There are defenders of the money that Superman made, and there's the people that say it made the money they wanted to make, and they felt okay with that. So they went ahead and released it early on digital and be in time so people could watch it at home before they watched Peacemaker, which I agree with, by the way. But then there's a lot of people, the Snyder cult, who are like, well, it didn't make more money than Man of Steel. First of all, when you're comparing box office on movies, inflation is not the only difference from 2013 and 2025. Okay. The landscape of the market is completely different. We're 12 years after that movie. Okay. Barack Obama was president when Man of Steel dropped. All right. So let's get that out of the way. Now, Superman is like the second movie to enter the Letterboxd's 2 million watched club, where 2 million people on Letterboxd have said that they've watched Superman, which shows what James Gunn is doing is working. Because what a lot of people fail to understand or refuse to understand is that when you're building a new universe like they are with the DCU, you're not going to get Spider-Man No Way Home box office on your first installment, no matter how good it is. The build-up isn't there, the payoff isn't there, but more importantly, what also isn't there is you have to give the fandom time to receive this movie and grow. All the people that are going to watch Superman and become DCU fans aren't necessarily people who bought tickets and went to see this movie in theaters. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to watch this movie over the course of the next year at home. There are going to be people who become casuals and aren't casuals and don't even think they care for Superman. And they'll probably be home, maybe Christmas break, and they'll rent Superman on Apple TV and they'll watch it. And then some of them will be more interested and be like, oh, I'll check out Peacemaker. And then they'll go and watch Supergirl. And then they'll watch Lanterns. And next thing you know, you have more DCU fans. The point is, the more time you allow, more people hop on board the ship and become part of the fandom. Whether they're casuals or not, who really cares? The point is that more fans come after the movie has had time to permeate the market. And the fact that Superman hit this milestone in the Letterboxd's 2 million watched club so quickly is a huge indicator that Superman is permeating the market of consumers very, very quickly, which is a very strong sign for what's to come for the DCU. And it means that Superman 2, or whatever they're doing with the sequel for the Superman saga, could easily do more than the first Superman movie, because more fans will be there and more people will show up because more people have had time to become fans, And I think that's a really important distinction. The other thing I want to say is I love the Dark Knight trilogy. I love the Batman. But I do think that it's just time to put the realistic Batman stuff to bed. And don't get me wrong, I'm still hyped for the Batman Part 2. I think that movie is going to be incredible. But I think it's just like we're talking about them overplaying the line, oh, this movie is a comic book come to life. Like, who I would like to see get that treatment is effing Batman, man. Batman is the GOAT. Batman is the face of DC. And Batman's world and mythos is so much more than just this realism. And, I really love that show, Gotham. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but if you haven't watched it, it's incredible. It's not a Batman show, but it's a show about Gotham City and all the villains and their origin story. It's not canon, but it's pretty close to accurate for the most part. They made some crazy changes to Penguin, but Penguin's character is still really cool. But it was very fantastical. And when they finally do the fantastical version of Batman, I am going to lose my mind because it is so overdue. It's crazy to me. And again, I love the Batman, but it is crazy to me that after all this time, we already have the Dark Knight trilogy, that the next Batman solo movie we got, they were instead of being more comic accurate, let's just go further and make it more realistic than what Christopher Nolan did. So, and it's funny because like even you could just look at the Batmobiles and you could see it's more realistic than what Nolan gave us. So, yeah. And when it comes to the Justice Gang being a part of the Superman saga and the next Superman movie, it makes me wonder, are they planning on doing a Justice League movie anytime soon? Because it seems to me that the Justice League movie could be much further away than we think. They're talking about so many projects, and Batman, Brave and the Bold, the only thing we ever really hear about it is that it's going well and that Robert Pattinson is not going to be the DCU Batman. There's the only two things we hear about that movie. And that it's inspired by Batman and Robin from, which one was it? Hold on. Grant Morrison. And, which, by the way, if you're interested, that is a great comic run. I would just read the whole Grant Morrison run because it's all worth reading, and then that is a part of it. The interesting piece of it is that the Grant Morrison run, called the Batman and Robin portion of that run, where the book is Batman and Robin, is that it's actually Dick Grayson as Batman and Damian as Robin. And we know Damian's going to be the Robin, but I just, and when I was listening to that podcast that James Gunn just did, and this was like 2 days ago, by the way, it was called, I mentioned it before, I Think You're Overthinking It. So James Gunn said, he did seem pretty confident when he said that Batman and Brave and the Bold is going well. And he also said something else that was really interesting. He said that when it comes to IP, a lot of the time, the IP is much more important than the actor being a well-known and well-established actor. And that was a really interesting point he made. And it immediately, I thought of David Corenswet because, very few people had heard of David Corenswet before. And yeah, he'd done some things and some people knew who he was. I'm not saying he was a no-name completely, but they were able to make this movie that got all this hype because it was Superman, not really because it was David Corenswet. And when you think about that, I think that it also indicates their thought process behind casting Batman for the DCU, because Pattinson is obviously a very well-known name. He has like his busiest schedule ever right now with all the movies he's doing, but they are going to pick someone similar to Corenswet that we don't really know. Most of us will never have heard of him. And, the Snyder cult will come out and say, oh, he's terrible. He's the worst thing ever. He's never going to be better than Ben Affleck, and the guy's probably going to come out and deliver because James Gunn knows what he's doing when it comes to casting. So I'm really hyped about that. I cannot wait for the Batman movie, Batman, Brave and the Bold. Batman's just my favorite DC character, and I just think it's about time we got a fantastical Batman movie. Do you have a fave fan cast for DCU Batman? I think the dude that was runner-up for Soups has a chance. Tom Brittany. I don't know him. Let me look him up. I really don't. I think some of the names that have been thrown around for the James Bond castings, I would probably like, but I don't have a number one choice. I mean, this guy definitely looks like if they dyed his hair right, that he could pull off the Bruce Wayne, but I haven't seen him in anything. Have you seen him in anything, Kev? Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if I really have a choice for the Batman. I have faith in James Gunn. I think James Gunn has earned that from us. I trust that he's going to pick someone that is going to deliver. Oh, that is true. Nicholas Hoult did lose out on the Superman casting, which, by the way, when Nicholas Hoult had the tick and when he was in the Fortress of Solitude, and he was like Superman. That really reminded me of, how I got these scars. I did the Joker voice horribly, but I'm not an actor, okay? So don't come for me. But it reminded me of Heath Ledger from The Dark Knight. Like, Nicholas Hoult delivered so hard on that. The other thing, the fact that Brainiac is going to be involved, which they basically showed us from some of the special features for the Superman digital release. Brainiac is such an incredible villain, and Brainiac is a villain that travels the multiverse and goes to different worlds to obtain all the knowledge of all of the worlds. And then he arms himself with that knowledge to destroy worlds. And like, just the time that we're living in with AI and everyone kind of arguing if we need to put, safeguards or in place for AI, and, AI is information without morality because it's not human. I just think it's the perfect time for Brainiac. And I think that if they give us a Brainiac Superman movie, I'm telling you right now, especially for the era that we're in, like as Americans, I'm telling you right now, that movie could go down as one of the greatest live action Superman comic book movies of all time. Because one of the coolest things about like the best stories, and this is true in comic books, it's true in movies, is that they stop and they make you think. They make you think about the world a little bit differently. That's why Jonathan Hickman is my favorite writer. But that's why people still talk about The Matrix or Terminator, and a lot of these movies that just made you think about the world differently. And I'm telling you, Brainiac as a villain versus Superman during the AI era is going to go so hard. People will lose their minds. Brainiac is just such a great villain, and we've never seen him in live action either. So there is it's all there for the taking. And like I said, I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm not a movie maker. And if I'm thinking about this, I'm confident that James Gunn, who is the brilliant creator behind these movies, has thought about it. So, I think that'll be awesome. But yeah. So, all right. So we got a little time left. I also wanted to talk about just some comics, but there's this comic going on right now, Imperial, and Imperial #3 dropped yesterday. And this is Jonathan Hickman's new cosmic Marvel comic. Every now and then Marvel will put out a really cool cosmic Marvel story, and usually the goal is to get people to care about Marvel Cosmic again. And the story started where some of the Hulklings or Hulk's family were poisoned, and they were meeting in Xandar about it. And it was the Xandarians, the Imperial Guard. I forget if the Super Skrulls were there. Anyway, they were meeting about it, and then there was a sniper. But what was really cool about Imperial 3 is that we learned that basically, and they hinted at this in the first issue, is that the Grand Master was behind it, and the Grand Master was stoking this war. And the Grand Master was playing this really intricate board game that's a fictional board game versus Maximus, which is Black Bolt's brother, the Inhuman. And Maximus bet they had a huge wager. Maximus was like, I am going to gamble all the secrets of the Terrigenesis and all the knowledge of the Inhumans, which, for the record, the Terrigenesis, once that's activated, is how the Inhumans got their powers to begin with. So when Maximus is just he's just such a sly little douchebag, which is what makes him so interesting. But anyway, so Maximus loses, and the Grand Master was like, I don't even want that. He's like, you see what I'm doing? I don't even need that. I just wanted to beat you while you had a huge wager against me. But the way the Grand Master had stoked all the conflict within Wakanda, within Xandar, within the Skrulls, within the Guardians of the Galaxy, like it was just so intricate. And first of all, I don't know that they're going to do a movie on it anytime soon, because it's just, I don't think that the way the MCU is going right now, that if they're going to do a cosmic movie, it's going to involve these players. I think it'll be much more Fantastic Four focused, maybe Guardians of the Galaxy. But this was like Dune meets Marvel Cosmic. It is so cool. And, this is one of the things I love that's going on in comics right now. Absolute Batman is also incredible. If you haven't read it, I would definitely read that. The 11th issue just came out. It was about Bane's origin, Absolute Bane, who is absolutely more brutal than regular Bane. So that was really cool. And, the other issue, this book I want to talk about is, World's Finest. So World's Finest, which is from Mark Waid and Dan Mora, who is doing the art behind it, which a lot of people say they think Dan Mora is the best comic artist in the game right now. I don't even think he's the best DC artist. I would probably have him as my number 2, but I still think Jorge Jimenez is the GOAT. But anyway, his art is still like immaculate. I still love his art. So, but the interesting thing about the World's Finest book is that it's not actually, so World's Finest, if you don't know, is Batman and Superman's like team up name. And they went back to like the Silver Age, so the stories aren't actually canon to today. So they were able to not worry about continuity as much, but they were using Silver Age Batman. And one of the things that's really interesting about that is that, at any given point in time, a creator could come along and completely reinvent a character. And that's what Frank Miller did with Batman in The Dark Knight Rises. So Silver Age Batman is very different than the Batman we know. So it's really interesting. Again, like different versions of characters are really cool. And there's absolutely a place for something like that. But they have to be an alternative offering, not the only offering. So anyway, bit of a shorter show than usual tonight. I think we went through all the stuff pretty quickly. If anyone has any comments or questions or anything, I'll give it about a minute. And if not, we'll wrap it up after that. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks to everyone who joined. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your support. I hope you watch Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 1 tonight and enjoy it. And we will see you back here next week, Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Peace out.